Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome. Welcome to this 12th week of the University of Nicosia's free MOOC on NFTs and the Metaverse. I'm George Yaglis, and I'm honored and privileged to be joined by Punk 6529 as always. This is an important session today. It's not the last one in the course, as I will be explaining in a while. We have quite a few super interesting guest sessions and panels coming up in the next couple of weeks. But today is the last of the, let's call them main or core sessions of this course. It's the 12th week of this program that 6529 and I designed a few months ago to provide people with a holistic overview of the NFT and Metaverse and Web3 space. And you will be the judges of whether we've done a good job on that or not. I would like to take this opportunity to once again thank 6529 both for his great insights in designing the course and delivering this material, but also for his whole presence in this space. I think I'm not exaggerating if I say that he has been the person that has influenced our thinking on decentralization and the need for openness in Web3 more than probably anyone else in this space. Anyway, I would like to, the topic of today is Metaverse 2030, so it's going to be really interesting to hear 6529's views on the future of the internet and how it fits with the history of its development so far. But before doing that, I would like to start by giving you an update on course logistics, since this is the last core session of the course, and I know that many of you will have questions related to the final exam and how we're going to schedule the next few weeks from here. Before I start, let me say that, as always, this is a work in progress. This is an experiment that is happening live. We are experimenting on how to do a fully on-chain in the Metaverse course. So I know that I'm not going to answer all your questions related to the exams today. There are some things that we're still thinking about and we will finalize in the coming weeks. But I'm going to give you our thinking as it is now. I'm going to announce a few things that you need to know in order to prepare and take the final exams. But if you have additional questions, please post them on Twitter, on Discord, and in the OM today and in the next weeks. Even those questions that we will not answer today, we are creating an FAQ section both on the course website and on Discord as a pinned message in the course channel. So we will be adding answers to your questions as they come along in the next few days and weeks. So let me start by addressing a little bit the final exam. First of all, I guess everyone will want to know when and where will the exams take place. We are, as I said, we have a couple of, not a couple, quite a few guest sessions following up in the next couple of weeks. So we are scheduling the exams for the second half of February. So between the 15th and the 28th of February, we will announce the exact date and time soon. What we do in other MOOCs, those of you that have taken one of University of Nicosia's other MOOCs will know it, is that we usually keep the exam open for a full 24-hour period. So you will have like 2 hours to finish the exam from the time you started, but you can start it at any time during the day that the exam is open. I think this is the model that we will be following this time as well, but we'll give you details as soon as we have them. What I can say at this stage is that, as with everything in this course, the exam will be held on-chain. I will explain later on what this means. Who can participate in the exam? You will need the course access token in your wallet. So as you know, we don't know you by name. We have registered students in this course by having everyone mint a course access token. We made the decision not to use this token to gate and control access to the course material. We wanted to have all the material available to everyone, because this is, the model of free education that we believe in. But you will need the course access token to be able to access the final exam. So make sure that you do have the token, and you know in which wallet, in which Ethereum address this is stored, because this is the Ethereum address with which you will need to log in the exam website when the time comes to take the exam. What's the format of the exam? It's going to be a multiple choice quiz, most likely consisting of 50 multiple choice questions, each question having up to 4 possible answers, of which in some questions one answer will be correct, other questions might have multiple correct answers, and the different types of questions will be noted in the exam. What is the passing grade? You will need to score 60% or higher in the exam in order to pass it. And if you pass the exam and you want to do so, you will be able to claim the certificate of completion NFT that we will give to students that pass the exam. How will this certificate be sent? Those of you that have passed the exam will be allowed listed to mint the certificate as an Ethereum NFT. As we've said from the beginning, the minting cost will be 0.25 Ether plus the gas fees that you will need to pay depending on the gas on Ethereum at the time of minting. Again, I need to stress that this is not a mandatory step. You can take the exam, you can pass the exam, and still not claim the NFT certificate of completion. So everything will be 100% free for you. How do you prepare for the exam? What material you need to study? We will be basing the multiple choice questions on the material that is included in the main presentation slides. And when I say main presentation slides, I mean the 12 decks that comprise the weeks 1 to 12 of this course. All these presentations are accessible in GitHub. You know the address, and it's also linked in the course website. And you may want to watch the video sessions in which 6529, I and guests have been presenting the slides. I think this will help you prepare the exam, but you should be able to take the exam and prepare for it by reading through the presentation slides. The guest sessions are optional. I think they have been super interesting. I think the ones that are coming up are also super interesting, but we will not have any questions drawing from material that has not been addressed in the main presentations and has already been discussed in the optional sessions. Some of you will not have the access token because they joined the course later. As I've said, we made the decision not to make this mandatory, but will still want to take the exam. I'm afraid this is not possible, so you will not be able to take the exam unless you have the course access token. At this point in time, your best bet is to go to the secondary market and acquire it. It's pretty cheap. I mean, I checked this morning, and the floor price for the unique access token on OpenSea was less than $5. So I hope this will not be an obstacle for anyone that wants to take the exam. If for any reason you don't want or you cannot acquire the course access token, then your other option is obviously to wait until the next iteration of the course. I don't want to commit 6529 to anything, but we've been discussing how we are going to repeat this with updated material and new guests in the future. So those of you that for whatever reason do not want or cannot take the exam at this point in time, there will be opportunities in the future, although obviously this is the genesis cohort of this class, so I guess receiving the NFT of completion might have some, sentimental value for everyone in the future. You will be able to find more information on, as always, on our Twitter account, the Unique Metaverse, our Discord channel, Join Unique. We will be announcing the date and all details about the exam there. Some more technical information about how the exam will take place. You don't really need to know this, but just to give you a glimpse of what's happening under the hood as we're preparing for the exam. As I've said, we want to make the exam fully on-chain, so you will be able to access the exam through your browser. The exam itself, so the exam paper, will be minted as an NFT token that will be encrypted. So unless you have the course access token, you will be able to see this NFT. You will be able to check its metadata, but you will not be able to access the actual content of the exam. Obviously, you will need to connect your MetaMask or other Ethereum-compatible wallet that contains the course access token, as I've said, to be able to access the exam. Once you do so, once you access the exam, your browser will be revealing the questions, whether this will be 50 or another number we still haven't finalized, but the questions will be revealed to you one by one. You will be able to answer the question, each question, and move to the next. And at the end of the quiz, you will be asked by your wallet to sign your responses before sending them for validation. Once this happens, your responses will be recorded on the Ethereum blockchain. There will be a transaction that's going to be broadcasted on the network. We're working on a zero-knowledge proof architecture that will preserve both your personal privacy and the privacy of your answers from everyone. So no one will be able to see your responses, but they will be able to validate that you have actually taken the exam and submitted these responses. Your final grade will be automatically computed. Our idea is that we will not grade the exams manually, but we will have the smart contract of the exam doing the computation and revealing your final grade to you, along with a cryptographic proof that verifying the whole process. And if you have passed, then your personal NFT certificate of completion will be minted, will be rendered on your screen. And if you want, you will be able to mint it as an NFT and store it in your personal wallet for perpetuity. At this point in time, we haven't decided on details regarding the look, feel, and characteristics of the completion NFT. So, for example, we're still debating whether this should be a soul-bound token or not. Whether you should be able, obviously, you won't be able to sell it. But we understand that people might want to transfer it to other wallets that they own. So we will be working on a design that preserves these first principles. Needless to say, if any of you have further questions, have ideas regarding how we should go about doing a fully on-chain privacy-preserving exam and how we should be designing the course completion certificate, please reach out to me via email or on Twitter or on Discord. I'll be more than happy to hear your ideas and discuss them with 6529. Now, finally, before I give the floor to 6529, I told you that although this is the final core session of the course, we have at least 5 very, very important sessions coming up with guests happening next week and the week after. So we will have a panel, 4 panel discussions, one about the metaverse, one on generative art, one on NFT photography, and one on crypto art NFTs. As you see in this slide, I'm not going to go through the names. There's it's a super impressive list of people participating in this panel. So I would encourage you to attend all of them if you can live, because you will have the opportunity to ask questions to all these people live. And we will have a final discussion closing this course with none other than Balaji Srinivasan, alongside Punk 65291, one of my top favorite thinkers in this space, the author of The Network State. If you have missed his latest book, I strongly encourage you to read it. We were talking with Balaji, and we're trying to fix a date for having him live in the course, so we will be announcing this soon. We should be finishing with all these panels in the first week of February. That's why I said second week or later will be the date of the exam. So that's all from me. Once again, if you have questions regarding to the course logistics final exam or course certificate, please hit me up on Discord, Twitter, or via email, and monitor these channels as we will be updating our FAQs regarding this material. Without further ado, I'm gonna give the floor to 6529 now to take us through the topic of the day, which is Metaverse 2030 and the vision of the future of Web3. Thank you.
Thank you, George. And minor logistical point, Balaji might happen earlier than some of these, so we might not close with Balaji. I was talking to him today. And so that might happen in the next few days. Maybe, depends. We've been trying to schedule it for the last few weeks. And it's possible we have a couple of other sessions between the panels and the, what's the word I'm looking for? And the examination, depending on when your team is ready with the exam. But I think as a general rule, we still have quite a few great speakers and panels coming. So I'm really excited about this and look forward to the last few weeks of the course. All right, today's session is going to be highly conceptual. This is not something that has a lot of detailed material out in the world. I believe it is a topic that is generally poorly understood, underthought about, and definitely vastly underworried about by not just the average person, it's not too surprising, but even by people who should know better, even by policymakers, even by advocates for democracy, even by advocates for constitutional rights. There is a small number of us, Balaji, as George mentioned, but also folks like John Robb, who are deeply worried about this. And like 99.999999% of the world who hasn't thought about this at all, is not worried about it at all. And quite frankly, if you talk about it with them, they might think this is all a bit absurd. But I'm sure it's not absurd, and I'll try and give a sense of what I'm worried about, what I think we can do, and in all cases, I actually think it's quite challenging. So, that slide's wrong. Okay. Let's start with what is the internet? And, for someone who might be joining the internet now in 2020 or 2023 or 2010 as a mature system with large applications, it might not be exactly obvious what the internet is or what it was designed to be. And what it was designed to be is very simple. It was designed to be a network of networks. The way to imagine it is to think that there was a time where people had a variety of their own networks within an office, within a government, within an academic institution. And those networks did not necessarily interoperate with each other, did not necessarily communicate with each other. And the idea behind the internet wasn't to build the one top-down network that everyone has to use. The idea was to allow people to make their networks interoperate with each other. A network of networks, not a network. And if you go back to 1972, famously, the internet was in some ways invented at DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency of the United States government. And as the theory went back then, it was designed to create a communication network that would be resilient to a nuclear attack because it would be decentralized, because there wouldn't be one point of failure. And the original four concepts behind the internet were these following, and it goes to this theory of a network of networks. So we should actually read them, they're interesting. That each network had to stand on its own, and no internal changes could be required of each network before being connected to the internet. So this makes sense. If you communicate among your devices within your own network, in your house or business, you don't have to change how you do that so long as you then communicate in the standard-based way once you connect to the internet. Now, in practice, most internal networks now are also communicating in the similar way as the internet, but that was not and is not a design protocol. Second, communication is a best efforts exercise. So you try and move the packets forward. If it doesn't work, you retransmit, you try again. It gives redundancy, resilience. Quote unquote black boxes, and it's funny because black boxes have been, it's entered the vernacular for a whole variety of usages. But what we mean really are the routers and the gateways connect the networks, and they're not content aware. They're a black box. They just move the data further down. And for our purposes, the last one's the most important, which is no global control at the operations level. There's no one place that is in charge of the internet. There's no CEO of the internet. There's no Internet Incorporated. There's not one person or function or organization whose permission you need to ask to use the internet. Why? Because the internet is not a thing in and of itself. It's a way for people's individual networks to communicate with each other. It is perfectly possible that, say, the University of Nicosia says, if you want to be on my internal network, you have to get the permission of the IT department. Makes sense. That's their network. But there's nobody whose permission you have to ask to start transmitting packets across the internet. And this has two implications. The first implication is that everything we're going to then talk about relating to decentralization is not some type of radical, anarchist thing that nobody has ever done before. This is quite literally how the internet works. And I'm pretty sure everyone agrees that the internet has been an immense boon to global society, the fact that we can communicate globally with each other in all types of ways, is a huge plus for humanity. And then the second part is a huge reason the internet has become what the internet has become is because you do not need someone's permission to connect a server to the internet and start serving data. If this was, and I know it might be hard for people to conceptualize, but there was a time where before the app stores, and it's funny because the app stores are also permissioned, but it's even easier to think about it this way, where the phone carriers decided what applications would run on your phones. And so if you wanted to have, you made a new application, let's say you made WhatsApp, you'd have to go to AT&T and say, I would like to convince you to allow me to use WhatsApp, to install WhatsApp on the devices on your network. And AT&T is going to say, oh, cool, what does WhatsApp do? Oh, it's free text messaging, basically. Except it's better. It's better than text messaging. You can do pictures, you can do videos. AT&T is going to say, well, but this is going to compete with my text messaging service. And say, oh, yeah, it's better, in fact. People are going to like it more. And AT&T is going to say, well, you want me to sign off and give you access to all of my brand and customers and installed base so you can compete with me? And say, yeah, that sounds good, right? And I say, go jump in a lake. Of course I'm not going to let you run on my network. Or let's say you're, I don't know, take the other end of the spectrum. You say, here's my application. Oh, what does your application do? Oh, you say, if you press this button here on my application, it makes farting sounds. Excuse me, what do you mean it makes farting sounds? You know, just fine. The phone will make a farting sound. You're now AT&T. Ma Bell, the glory of the American telecommunications industry. You say, you expect me under the AT&T brand to make available to my customers, the parents of America, the mothers and fathers of America, you want me to make available a farting app? I'll get fired. The board of directors someone will show a board member, they'll be shocked, horrified, and they'll fire me. Of course you can't have a farting app. And you might say, oh, I don't know, should the farting app exist? Maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't, but the important point is, once you build these choke points in, they will be used for the purposes of the organization. They will be used for the purposes and business objectives of the organization. Whether they're like very serious business objectives, they don't want someone to compete with their text messaging service. Or maybe they're indirect business objectives. The brand manager of AT&T or the CEO of AT&T thinks the AT&T brand stands for something, and that something doesn't include farts. The internet is not like that. You can connect to the internet, make a website, press a button on the website, and your website can make farting sounds. No one can tell you, oh, this is very brand inappropriate for the internet. We can't allow this. You're going to have to take this down. Because it's just a communication protocol. It's a way to connect the network. It's a network of networks. It's a way for networks to talk to each other. And The fact that we can do silly things, important things, things that seem silly but then turn out to be important. Twitter, to me, is the definitive example. Everyone thought Twitter was absurd at first, not that important. And now it's a major communication platform for presidents and prime ministers. But this was also true of Facebook. You can read things when Facebook first started. Oh, what a terrible idea. It's a platform for college kids who have no money and have nothing better to do to chat with each other. This doesn't sound very serious. If this was the public press at the beginning of Facebook, why would this be worth anything? Why does this matter? And so societies are better when they allow you to permissionally innovate. Because there will be many bad ideas. Right? Like Facebook and Twitter, Facebook and Twitter have survivorship bias. There were many, many ideas tried on the internet, most of which tried and failed. But the ones that succeeded changed the world. And those typically don't come from some central planning type function. They come from the marketplace of ideas. So one, I just made a utility-based case for society. Society will have better products and services if you let people permissionally innovate. But there's also a human dignity, human expression, human freedom case. A world where you're allowed to make a farting application. I specifically am picking that type of example, right? Obviously, if I picked an example that says a world where you're allowed to make a website to teach mathematics, I was like, oh, everyone's, of course, our centralized services are going to allow you to make websites to teach mathematics. How free a society is, how many rights and how much dignity you have as a citizen of society is when you're allowed to do things that poke fun of the people in power, are maybe not viewed as desirable by the people in power, are viewed as possibly not having dignity. This is how a free society operates, right? And so the internet, by its design, was a form of free society. Now, that design was designed that way for resiliency, more so than, I think, permissionless innovation. But those design choices that built that resiliency were also the same design choices that gave us permissionless innovation. And they gave us the internet we have today. It's very, very important, right? And this is the basis for everything else we're going to talk about. It's not as if none of these things have been done before. They've been done. We use them every day. It's called the internet. And it works great. Now, this is like the good news. What's the bad news? Well, the internet at basically every level is centralized. And this comes from all the way from the hardware and network layer all the way up, right? So from bottom up, you start with internet service providers. Most countries, or most locations in most countries, have a monopoly, a duopoly, or an oligopoly of service providers. And since they're the ones who are transmitting the packets for most people, they're a choke point. If it's hard to imagine what the alternative is, like, oh yeah, but I got to get internet from somewhere, right? I'm going to get Comcast or AT&T or what have you, right? How could it work a different way? Well, a different way, and this is not mature yet, but a different way would be what's called mesh networking. where even the physical communication is going peer-to-peer from device to device, that there is not one single point that says, this data can come through this point and this data cannot. You don't feel this so much in the West, but ISPs are a problem. When Egypt was having one of the various, social movements, and people were coordinating through the internet, and Egypt has, I believe, and I can't say I'm an expert on Egyptian ISPs, but what I remember just reading the news there, the government at some point just shut down the internet for the whole country. They just called Egypt Telecom or whatever it's called and said, hey, just shut it down. Oh, this is bad for productivity. Well, sure. It's very bad for productivity. But on the other hand, we want the social movement to stop, so just turn off the internet. And because you had one service provider, you could turn it off. It's one level. Second level, cloud hosting. Cloud hosting is fantastic, right? I use Amazon Web Services for all types of things. It's convenient. It's fast. It's high performant. It has all types of features. It's less work. But it's a point of centralization. You see this sometimes when Amazon has data centers in different regions, and their big region is USA East. It's located in Northern Virginia. And if that region goes down, many of your favorite websites go down because they're all hosted there. Content delivery networks, CDNs. What do CDNs do? They store files close to the end user so they download quickly, so that the user experience is better. There's a handful of them. They also, in some cases, protect against what are known as DDoSs, distributed denial of service attacks. Again, these are very useful services that make the internet better day to day, but they are points of control because all of these are companies, right? And anything that is a company ultimately has a human in charge, and that human can ultimately decide to take an action for their own reasons or be compelled to by a government. And the only honest answer is that, when compelled to, a company will follow what a government asks them to do. They don't have a choice. These are kind of the architecture level. Well, let's go a step up to applications. Discovery, or what is now known as search, but used to be discovery, is highly centralized. In most countries, Google has a very high market share. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. Google's useful. I use it. The price of Google, the penalty of Google, is the things you don't see. If Google has a certain algorithm and for whatever reason that algorithm doesn't like a certain website topic, etc., it won't appear. Or it won't appear on the first page, or it won't appear in the first few pages. Quite frankly, if it doesn't appear in the first page, it's mostly like it doesn't exist. If it doesn't appear in the first few pages of Google search results, it definitely doesn't exist. So you could be there, you could be on the internet, but if an algorithm you have nothing to do with decides it doesn't like your website, it effectively does not exist for most people. Now, look, there's good reasons why the algorithm does these types of things. People try to spam Google, search engine optimization, and it's a cat and mouse game with the search engines. But as you've gotten to centralized, large market share providers, you get algorithmic risk. Like if search happened through 200 different algorithms, each with 0.5% market share, it wouldn't matter if one of them didn't like your website. And if almost all of them didn't like your website, well, there's probably a good reason. Right? Your website's not that interesting to people, right? Like maybe it's correct that but when there's one, it's less diversified. It's more likely something will go wrong for non-substantive reasons. Communication platforms have huge network effects. You want to go on Twitter because everyone else is on Twitter. You don't go on Twitter because it has 140 characters or 280 characters or what have you. I mean, that's trivially replicable. What's not replicable is that everyone else is on Twitter. And so, Facebook is like the network for short form medium form communication, LinkedIn for kind of job seeking professional communication, Twitter for short form communication. All of them with very high market shares, all of them fairly centralized. And unlike the internet, you need Twitter's permission to be on Twitter. All of this endless arguing about which accounts should be banned, which accounts should be boosted, which accounts should appear in the search results on Twitter is a failure of architecture. We don't have this discussion about websites. We don't have it about email because those are not centralized in the same way. Whereas on Twitter, whether you have an account or not depends on who the CEO is. And it doesn't matter who you think is right. Maybe Parag was making the right decisions. Maybe Elon's making the right decisions. The fact that there's a specific person whose views on content moderation you have to take into account is already the failure. It's irrelevant to me if Elon is more or less right than Parag. Totally irrelevant. There's no CEO of email, there's no CEO of the internet, but there is a CEO of our short messaging protocol. And that is a form of failure case. E-commerce is similar. Amazon has reasonable market share in e-commerce, eBay in its sector. Network effects are not quite as strong there, so it's not as bad. Payments is tragic, right? Payments still effectively run through the fiat system, and they effectively run through a couple of payment processors. Internet native payments are cryptocurrencies. And they're there and they exist. And they're very, very important. And they're under constant some form of attack by the non-crypto ecosystem. And this is not to say that things don't go wrong in crypto, but there has yet to be, I think, a major stakeholder in the non-crypto world to come out and say, a government of an important country, to say, well, this is important for decentralization purposes. In fact, most of the governments think this is a downside of crypto. They would like to keep payments under their control. So you look at this in aggregate and we're kind of coasting. Things have been getting worse. The internet of today is substantially more centralized than the internet of 1990 was. But it's gradual. It's one step at a time. Along the way, it gets more convenient. Along the way, it gets easier to use. Things load faster. You have more features and functionality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So nobody rebels because it's day-to-day activities getting better, while for existential reasons getting worse. I found an interesting draft paper from the IETF and their network working group on centralization and internet standards. And actually, it's a draft paper. It's not official. But I liked a couple of things that wrote so much that I just copy-pasted them right into here. And I'm going to read them. So, the internet's very nature is incompatible with the centralization of its functions. As a large, heterogeneous collection of interconnected systems, the internet is often characterized as a network of networks. These networks relate as peers who agree to facilitate communication rather than having a relationship of subservience to others' requirements and coercion by them. This focus on independence of action carries through the way the network is architected. For example, in the concept of an autonomous system. Second, the internet's first duty is to the end user. Allowing such power to be concentrated into few hands is counter to the IETF's mission of creating an internet that will, quote, help us build a better human society. When a third party has unavoidable access to communications, the, quote, informational and positional advantages gained can be used to observe behavior, the panopticon effect, and shape or even deny behavior, the choke point effect, which can be used by those parties or the states that have authority over them for coercive ends. I have nothing to add to this. I couldn't agree with this more. And then the paper goes on and lists 5 negative aspects of the concentration of power. Limiting innovation, which we discussed. Constraining competition, which is similar. The first and the second often go together. Reducing availability means that you're not building resilience and redundancy, and this could be because of unintended effects. So if you have one ISP and something happens in their facility and the whole internet for your country goes down inadvertently, that is a reduction of availability accidentally. But sometimes you have a reduction of availability, intentional. The Egypt Telecom example was an intentional reduction of availability. Creating monoculture. This is a limiting innovation point, but at the intellectual level. So this is if there's a certain set of values or principles that are acceptable to Facebook but not to others, and Facebook gets a dominant position on the internet, then we all have to go along with those sets of values, principles, forms of speech, what have you, where the world is a huge, diverse, heterogeneous place. We are not all alike at the individual interest group, regional, national level. We should not all be alike. We should not all have to be in a certain way. But if we then have to run through a specific corporation, that corporation may, for a variety of reasons, on purpose or accidentally, voluntarily or coerced by others, forced to flatten out, squash that human diversity to fit it into a specific standard acceptable to that corporation. And it's very, very hard to say, I'm going to have a corporation that fully allows all of these differences to exist. For one, some of the differences are long-standing national disputes among nation states where certain countries will say, well, you have to say this, and you're not allowed to say that, and their neighbor will say the opposite. And since no company is in a position, a social media company is not in a position to solve all world conflicts, they have to take a position on this topic. And sometimes they're taking three different positions, right? Their position in country X and their position in country Y and their position in third countries, and all of them might be different, and they're trying to balance all these things. And the only reason they have to try and balance all these things is there is centralized choke point. And then the last one is self-reinforcement. And this is the advantages. These are the advantages that a certain service has by being in a dominant position. You see this in search. If you see all of people's search queries and then what they then click on, you're in a better position to build a better search engine than someone who doesn't. This is considered a big risk in artificial intelligence or machine learning, to use a technical term, that the more data you have, the better your model is. If your model is better, more people are going to want to use it. If more people use it, they'll give you more data, and it spirals. So each of these are pretty bad. And I don't even think these are the bad things. My greatest worry is democracy itself. And again, I'm going to sound strange. I grant you. I'm in a deep minority position here. I grant you that most people, and I think, I don't remember who I discussed this with, I think Chris Dixon. So there's like an interesting divide in the world is between people for whom the digital world is real and people for whom it's not. A lot of people, if I had this discussion with them, might say, well, I mean, what difference does it make what happens on Facebook? That's not real life. In fact, I could just close my Facebook account. My real life is my car, my house, my physical goods. And I deeply disagree with that, both today and in the future, because I don't know about you, but I spend the vast majority of my working hours looking at a computer screen. Your phone also being, a fairly powerful computer. So between my phone screen and my laptop screen and my desktop screen, I spend the large majority of my waking hours looking at these. And then sometimes I'll, rare occasions, take a break and, watch a movie on Netflix on my TV, which is also a computer. Right? Any modern TV is also a computer as well. That is, operating through those same internet service providers who are in content delivery networks and centralized firms who are delivering your whatever you're seeing on your computer screen. And so my view is I already spend the majority of my life in the digital world, and quite frankly, the important things in my life, all of the things that I can afford in the physical world are downstream from my professional activities which are all intermediated by the digital world. And I don't know if this has happened to you recently. It happened to me once a few years ago, pre-COVID, when I was in an office where everyone else was in the office, and the internet went out. And then we called our internet provider, and the internet provider said, yeah, it's going to be out all day. We spent a few minutes in New York. We spent a few minutes thinking about what to do. And we realized there was basically nothing we could do. We were worthless in the office without internet. Totally and completely worthless. It was shocking. And it was shocking to think about that, I don't know, about 25 years ago, something in that range, most offices did not have internet access. And so people would go to work and do whatever they were doing, and whatever they were doing did not include the internet. 30 years ago, effectively none did. And you were thinking about this, that what actually can you do in an office without internet? I mean, you couldn't send an email. You couldn't browse the web. Theoretically, you could make some calls, but our CRM was online, our customer relationship management system was online, so you couldn't record the calls or, in fact, find the people who you were supposed to call, because that was also online. We were literally worthless without internet. And so we picked up and went home, and this was, pre-COVID times and pre-remote work times, but we went and figured, well, whatever the downside is from working from home, it's 1,000 times better than being here together without internet. And then it went a few days, and it was bracing, it was shocking. And I think basically everything is that way now, right? The large majority of people are dependent in some capacity on the internet to do anything. In which case, we already live in a digital world, and how we interact in a digital world and what is our governance and our architecture in the digital world is super important. And it's super important that we preserve the same models of governance that we have in the physical world in the digital world. I'll come to that in a second. All right. I'm going to introduce a concept that I have stolen from John Robb. John Robb is a systems/networks thinker. He came out of the military sphere. He thinks about networked tribes and OODA loops and all of these types of things. But he is concerned about the concept of the long night. And these are a couple of his tweets in order, and I'm going to read them. This disruption, although potentially painful in the short term, doesn't last, nor is it truly damaging over the long term. In fact, the true danger posed by an inter-networked world is the opposite of disruption. The danger is an all-encompassing online orthodoxy, a sameness of thought and approach reinforced by hundreds of millions of socially inter-networked corporations, a global orthodoxy that ruthlessly narrows public thought down to a single barren ideological framework, a ruling network that prevents dissent and locks us into stagnation and inevitable failure as it runs afoul of reality and human nature. This ruling network already exists. His concern, which is not dissimilar from mine, it's framed differently, but it's not dissimilar, is that as we network more and more and across centralized services, it becomes much easier to enforce certain rules, a certain way of thinking, a certain way of prescribed and allowed thought. And what I think we know historically from human societies is that societies that allow freedom of thought, that allow freedom of speech, that allow freedom of action, that are more human-centric, less top-down, less controlled, less totalitarian, less authoritarian, outperform in every way. They outperform in quality of life for their citizens. They outperform in innovation, and they outperform in human freedom and dignity. And I think the reason for it is that anything that ends up being hierarchical top-down eventually bottlenecks on an information processing side with the people at the top. Right? Like, even if you assume away bad intentions, which you should not, right? People in power ultimately prefer to stay in power. But even if you assume away bad intentions and assume that the people at the top selflessly want to manage the economy, the country, the society for its benefit, it is simply impossible for a small group of people at the top of any complex society to make all the right decisions on every single topic for everyone across the country. It is impossible. It is why, as humans went from smaller societies to larger societies, and simpler societies to more complex, advanced societies, we have decentralized power to let people operate, to let people look around in their. Take the simplest example. You're in Washington, D.C. Would it be logical for you to know if in Santa Fe, New Mexico, someone should open an organic grocery store? You know, if you look at Soviet-era central planning, 5 years plan, they were trying to do this across all 11 time zones of the Soviet Union. Turned out, you can't do it effectively. It doesn't mean you're not smart. It just means there's just too much information for a small group of people at the top to process. You need to let information process across everyone's brains, and ultimately, some combination of, the people in Santa Fe seeing what's happening in Santa Fe and some price signals from is organic food expensive or inexpensive, available or not available, will naturally lead to someone opening or not opening an organic food store. And it's like this for everything, right? Like systems that are centralized information processing systems break down under a certain level of complexity. And so when he means a single barren ideological framework that runs afoul of reality and human nature, I believe, I'm going to try and get him on the course in the spring. I believe, did you catch that, George? I might have committed for the spring. I believe this is what he means. That if you lose diversity of thought, including people who are quote unquote wrong, you end up with a less successful society. A successful society lets people disagree. A successful society lets people think wrong things, because sometimes it turns out, Most times when people are thinking wrong things, they're actually wrong. But sometimes when people are thinking wrong things, they're actually very, very, very right, and they help society move forward. And a mature, confident society allows this. And a top-down driven monarchy of the whatever century doesn't. And so hold this thought as we look at the next couple of slides. My concern is that we're about to invent a tremendous amount of awesome technology. Awesome. That is the correct word. I am not embarrassed to say it. I think over the next 5, 10, and 20 years, the quote-unquote fourth industrial revolution technologies will hit some type of sci-fi level of capability. I didn't put them all here. Biotech belongs on this, maybe quantum computing, genetic type of things, but I don't think they're as relevant for this discussion. The ones that I think are relevant are these. So, AI, machine learning. We've been talking about this for a very long time. On the whole, it has been generally less exciting than people have expected, but we are not far away from the timeline that some of the big AI thinkers thought of, that you'll start seeing big leaps in the 2020s. And what we're seeing from AI platforms like Stable Diffusion for creating images, OpenAI and ChatGPT, leaving aside that, Google search results are a form of AI, right? Match.com's feed is a form of AI. Ads you're being served is a form of AI. Leave those aside. They're already forms of AI. We are starting to see the beginning of AI that works for practical human things, that writes essays, that drives cars reasonably well in some conditions, that can generate poems and photos. And you can look at them now and say, oh, here's an error, and here's another error, and here's this thing that's going wrong. And I think for the purpose of this analysis, it doesn't matter, because all those things are getting better every month. So pick whatever time frame you want. You think it's 3 years, you think it's 7 years, you think it's 17 years. It's not 353 years. Within the lifetime of almost everyone in the audience today, we will see extremely capable AIs. A. B. Most major countries are heading towards some form of central bank digital currency. Central bank digital currencies are natively digital currencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum, but permissioned with central points of control, central points of programmability. This is viewed as a feature, not as a bug. It is viewed as a feature that will allow governments to implement automated rules from, at the most basic level, anti-money laundering and know your customer rules, to negative interest rates, to socially desirable spending rules. You can only spend this much on carbon or meat or what have you this month, right? You've passed your limit. So these are payment systems, and they are payment systems that, as described by some of their proponents, are much more directive than the payment systems we've had our whole lives, that ultimately have allowed for most of our lives, to a practical degree, also the possibility of cash. It is fascinating to me how the social construction over the course of my lifetime has taken cash from being a perfectly normal, wholesome thing. When I was a little kid, you say, oh, look, you get your allowance, you get cash, it's normal. Here's a $5 bill. When I was in university, I operated, as far as I can remember, primarily in cash. I'd go to the ATM, I'd take out cash for the week, and everyone thought this was perfectly normal. Of course, everyone's aware that there is some percentage of tax evasion from cash. There is some percentage of money laundering, drug dealing. These are all true things, and it is correct that law enforcement authorities chase these things around. That's what they should do. But we have gone from a presumption that cash is default normal, even wholesome, I would say, to a presumption that cash is default suspicious and should be eliminated, the quote unquote death of cash. Many countries here in Europe have now put limits on how much cash you can take out. Israel's done something similar. And within the European Union, there is an absolute strong push to keep reducing those limits. So it is viewed as socially desirable by many parties to eliminate cash. And then you'll have a fully permissioned system for spending, which will be sold as desirable. We will prevent spending on inappropriate things. Let's hold that thought. Next one, mixed reality. Mixed reality, as we saw earlier in this course, is augmented and virtual reality. Once again, over a practical time frame, it's going to be awesome. Our glasses, our contact lenses, maybe in the fullness of time are neural implants, but I don't know how. That one seems like it has a ways ahead of it. But our glasses, for sure. Will overlay Google Maps in your field of vision. They will bring Fidenzas into common fields of vision. They will remind you who the person was at the conference. They will allow you to transform your working space both aesthetically but also for productive purposes. Why am I limited to two 25-inch screens? You won't, don't worry, you won't be. We will be able to work and move through arbitrarily large digital and mixed reality spaces. It's wonderful. It will lead to greater productivity. It will lead to more immersive gaming. It will lead to more human level communication. Your friends, family, loved ones, romantic partners who are not living near you, you'll see them full sized in your field of vision. It's an improvement. It's an improvement in the quality of human life. It's great. But again, hold that thought. Big data capture, capturing of all the data, the amount of data that the first three are going to create will be staggering. And interestingly, the third, augmented reality will start picking up biometric data. Augmented reality has cameras in your field of vision. It might have, in time, cameras looking at your eye. It has much more intrusive data than even the most intrusive ads you see online. They'll be able to know in time, are you scared? Are you happy? Are you lying? Are you feeling pleasure from whatever it is that you're watching? Are you socially compliant? Are you less socially compliant? These things are not in a far sci-fi future. They are within a practical future. They're not today. We're not there yet. But they're also not 100 years away. And so you will have these gigantic data streams that are being driven from the first three. And then, metaverse, which is the name of this course, which I had said earlier in the course, and I stand by my definition, it's the internet, but with better visualization and persistent digital objects. And so you put these together, and the good part is our digital experience is about to get much, much better. In 10 to 20 years, I'm looking at my computer screens now that are basically the same user experience as the early browsers with slightly better graphics. Right? Like early Netscape was not an order of magnitude different than Chrome is today. And I'm looking at this and I think, oh yeah, there's no doubt in 10 or 20 years we're going to look at this and it's going to look antiquated. It's like, gosh, how did people even live that way? How did people even work that way? Can you believe the old people used to use the internet like this? Because it's going to become much more realistic, much more interactive. It will be a blended space of humans and AIs. There will be AIs to help with anything. Not just driving, not just walking you through the Uffizi, but I'm pretty sure education is going to change. I'm pretty sure the current model of education is going to get completely rescaled by AIs. So all of this is going to be wonderful. Right? We'll have a lot of features. But there's a dark side too. And the dark side looks something like the following. You will have basically the ability for a company or a government to have permanent, holistic surveillance of everyone's environment. We have already made great leaps in this area. All of us carry around with us a microphone at all times, which for most phones in most jurisdictions and most carriers can also be switched on remotely without you knowing. If you had told someone in, I don't know, the 1980s in East Germany that under the quite intrusive Stasi, that in the future, people in free countries will make sure they jam a microphone in their pocket wherever they go, people might be surprised. But yet we did, because it's convenient and useful, and it's nice to have cell phones. And cell phones now have all these features, and they have microphones and cameras, and they're pretty useful. But it's going to be much more than that, right? Like our glasses will be seeing our environment. We'll be tracking our biometric data. We'll be tracking our biometric data even through wearables, right? It'll be good for health. I have a watch on that tells me my heart rate and my steps. That's cool. It's useful. I want to know my heart rate and my steps. But I'm pretty sure Samsung also knows them. And maybe Google, I don't know. And maybe along the transmittal pathways, maybe many other people. Maybe national security agencies. Now, do national security agencies have any particular interest in how many steps it is? No, of course not. I am not that, one of the things with big data is less that someone is sitting there at the NSA being like, oh, wow, 6529 is not really getting his cardio in today. Nobody has time for that. There's billions of people in the world. But these things are valuable and interesting at the societal level, at the aggregate level. And so what you could do if you have this full environment and you have a centralized metaverse and the internet with better visualization, you can influence behavior both positively and negatively, basically at the subconscious level. One of my favorite analogies is machines are already breeding humans. And you say, what is that supposed to mean? Well, I think in the United States, something like 50% of marriages come from dating applications. And dating applications, you are presented a feed. And that feed is trying to somehow predict who you'd like to see, for better or for worse. And I'm not saying the feed has any negative intention, but it has good intentions. But it's some machine algorithm that's trying to find you a partner. And sometimes that turns out to be a spouse, and sometimes that to be the parent of the children you have together. And in some weird way, a machine has put you together, and the biases of that machine algorithm might change how people match up. And if they change how people match up, they might even, in effect, be changing the gene pool. It's weird. I mean, very weird to think about. But I think it's kind of true. And imagine that, but more granular, more immersive, more subconscious. If you are given little dopamine hits for doing things in societally approved ways, and it can be done at scale, it doesn't matter if there isn't someone at the NSA checking in on me personally. In fact, all this stuff doesn't need to be 100% effective. I'm going to say 80% effective, but it doesn't need to be 80% effective either. In most countries, the difference between who wins an election is a few percentage points. If you take the United States, you have these famous swing voters. There's a bunch of people who are always going to vote Republican, there's a bunch of people who are always going to vote Democrat, and who becomes the president or who controls the House or the Senate is some swing voters. All you need to do is subconsciously influence 5 or 10% of the population. Move them a little bit. Move everyone's views 5% in one direction, and you are president. I just gave you the innocuous version, right? The tougher version throws in some automated compliance. And compliance is going to come through the payment system. That's why I keep harassing everyone about this freedom to transact concept. Because you're going to say, the carrot is going to be the dopamine hits. The stick is the transactions won't go through. Oh yeah, we're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do that. I'm sorry, our scoring says you can't make this payment. And it sounds absurd, right? It doesn't sound like something that's going to happen. And even I wonder if I'm, at times, overestimating the risk. And then, this is where what happened in Canada with the truckers was, I thought, very telling. And I say this, even though I almost certainly, from what I can tell, have the opposite political views of the truckers. They actually sound like kind of a bunch of jerks, to be honest. But what was interesting to me is that the way that protest was resolved wasn't through kind of normal law enforcement mechanisms, but by cutting off their money, and then to their families. That was really interesting because that's Canada, and Canada is nobody's idea of some hellish dictatorship. I mean, Canada is absurdly friendly place. Liberal democracy. And they actually are a liberal democracy. Objectively, that's what they are. And yet, Canada discovered the power of the payment system to end the protest. And I'm concerned because a lot of people who should be concerned about this thing aren't concerned because they're like, well, I don't like those guys. I'm glad they did it. those truckers had bad intentions. Maybe they did. The problem is people will use it sometime against your preferred speech, against your preferred organization and protest or religion. Because once you can end a social movement not by winning in the marketplace of ideas, not by winning in elections, not by charging them with a crime that they have actually committed, but by just saying, oh, okay, you can't pay for stuff. And there's no exit. Well, my credit card won't process this payment, but I can go to cash. No, cash is gone in this world. So you can't go to cash. This is a world where I suspect, there's at least sectors of this world that consider quote unquote self-hosted, quote unquote non-custodial wallets, which is what used to be known as wallets, right? In crypto, they want them to go away. It's a wallet. It's where you have your money in your pocket. They want them to go away for custodial wallets, and custodial wallets are not wallets at all, they're accounts. They want people to have accounts, not wallets. I put this in air quote, but there's for sure a sector of the regulatory state that believes this is desirable, and they might be well-intentioned. But what this will mean is you will have given people in power an immensely powerful set of tools. And here I'm going to go a little bit abstract, but this is an old Chinese proverb, heaven is high and the emperor is far away. And what it means, particularly pre-internet days, pre-fully industrialized days, the emperor might be in Beijing and has a certain view that you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't say that, but you're in, I don't know, the Sichuan province. And okay, fine. The emperor thinks that. But I'm going to say this other thing to my friend. I'm going to do this other thing here. There were practical limits on their ability to enforce their power and their good, but more importantly, bad ideas. They were practically limited. What is scary about these technologies is not that they allow something that wasn't previously possible. It's that they allow it on superhuman scale, and in fact, it will be run on superhuman scale. It will be run by AIs. And this is a set of power we've never given to anyone before. And it's going to be sold as socially desirable. And the question that has to be asked, that needs to be asked, that I have yet to see good answers to, is who watches the watchmen? Who guards the guards? When someone says, oh, we have the CBDC, and the nice thing about it, it can only do transactions that are good. Okay, sounds great. I prefer a society where people only do good transactions and don't do bad transactions. It sounds actually socially desirable. But who gets to choose that? There is usually, I've read a lot about these things, and I've spoken to people about these things. I've been called to advise on these things. And there's usually very little talk about who gets to decide and what is the democratic governance of those decisions, and what is the review process in those decisions, what's the transparency of those decisions, how can those decisions be challenged? There's close to none of that. It is assumed that the people in power can make good decisions, and then the people not in power will, of course, follow them because they're good decisions. But we've passed this. We've passed this phase in human development, right? This was a phase of pre-constitutional rights. Constitutional rights start off by saying the sovereignty is with the individual, not the state. Do you have to follow rules? Of course. But are you default free? Yes. Are you default allowed to do things? Yes. Are you default allowed to own things? Yes. Can the state deprive you of your rights, your freedom of speech, your freedom of movement, your property? Not without due process. The state has to say, you did something wrong. The thing you did wrong is this. The penalty is that. You have a jury of your peers. You have a lawyer. There's a set. The hurdle is significant for the state to do it. And that creates a version of level of check on state power. If we move all of this to an automated system running on private infrastructure, you don't have any constitutional rights on Facebook's servers. They're not yours, they're Facebook's. Just like you don't have any constitutional right to come into Mark Zuckerberg's house and lecture him in his living room. And this is correct, because if you did have a constitutional right to go in his servers or go in his living rooms, you'd have to assume a coercive state that would force him to let you in. So it's correct that you don't have any rights there. But if it turns out that we build our whole infrastructure on this type of underlying architecture, all types of policies will be implemented. They will be effectively unreviewable. They will be implemented at scale. And they will be abused. People keep talking about the state, but the state also means people. There is someone in charge of the state. In the United States, the executive is the president. And the president has a lot of power. And Congress also has power. And those are individual people. They're just people just like you and me. And they're not infallible. And in fact, their objectives are unlikely to be wholly pure. Some of them might be, but they're unlikely all of them to be wholly pure. And so every time you hear the word state, you just substitute person. Should a person have this amount of power? Often to me, the answer is no. It's not like I think George shouldn't have this amount of power, but I should. I don't think I should either. But I also don't think any other arbitrary person should either. And this is what the nature of a constitutional democracy is, right? The nature of a constitutional democracy puts significant limits on the government's power versus what it used to be before we did this. And if we lose this indirectly in the digital world, in this highly immersive digital world, it can be very problematic. Now, okay, so this was all like, mostly scary, and I think it is mostly scary. I mean, this is kind of the basis of everything I've been writing about on the open metaverse. What can we do? I actually don't think it's much, right? And it's difficult, and it's very high level. And at the first approximation is the first level of abstraction is, well, do we have the same rights digitally as we do in the physical world? Do we have a default right to privacy online? Do we have a default right to ownership online? Can you own something? Can you own a piece of art? Because to own it, you need that quote-unquote non-custodial wallet. If it has to be held in custody by Coinbase or Kraken or Bitstamp or JP Morgan Chase, well, no. Then we're saying we trust our citizens to own a piece of art in their living room, but we don't trust our citizens to own a piece of art on the internet. Which, my view is that's an incorrect decision for society to make. In any case, my view is we need to have that discussion as a society. As the world becomes more digital, there needs to be a genuine discussion among policymakers and the people of what we think the right balance of power is between the state and its citizens in the digital world, noting that everything's a trade-off. Of course, fighting crime is easier when you don't have any rights. Of course. But we have decided, in at least most constitutional democracies, that fighting crime is very important, but it's not the only thing that matters. Because if it was the only thing that matters, then a cop could walk into your house anytime to just check to see what you're doing. And generally not. They've got to get a warrant. They've got to go to court. They've got to go through some process, right? Because you start off with the right. So the first level is the constitutional rights. The second level is, again, what I keep harassing everyone about, what I call freedom to transact, which it is a model of there needs to still exist some default allowed system of transactions. We still have one today. It's called cash. You are default allowed to pay someone with cash. Credit cards is not like that, right? The credit card goes for payment process and it says yes or no. A third party says yes or no to the transaction. But cash is not. If I take $20 and I give it to someone and buy a burger and a beer, there's no third party in that transaction. I believe we need to maintain a default allowed payment system. And I believe digitally, because I don't think the CBDCs, the right thing would have been for the CBDCs to become default permissionless, just like cash is. But I don't think they're going to do that. I've been having discussions with the Federal Reserve for a long time on this. I don't think they're going to do it. And so that means being allowed to hold crypto assets in your own wallet. I think that's what the choice is going to boil down to. And then the last thing, which is also part of my thesis, and the one that I think I can have the most influence on, is this metaverse with persistent digital objects needs a database to store those objects. And that database can be one or several big companies, or it can be a public blockchain. And if it's a public blockchain, we have a system to store an arbitrary digital object. It's called an NFT. And if people can own their NFTs, and then companies, organizations, governments build applications to use them, that's fantastic. Some of those applications can be large and centralized. That's also fantastic. But they should not control the database of record, because that database of record is a database for our world. And so to me, we're at a very interesting path in the road, or fork in the road. I think the decisions that are made in the 2020s over the next few years will determine what the architecture and ultimately the human rights architecture of our life will be in the 2030s and afterwards. I think because of the network effects and the kind of monopolistic effects or oligopolistic effects of the internet, whatever system gets established the next few years will become the system that wins. Just like it's hard to get off Twitter, if everyone stores take a simple example, digital art as an NFT, then artists will be making digital art as NFTs in the 2030s. If everyone stores it on, Facebook art service, that's what's going to win. We'll find out which one it is over these few years. I think there are things we can do. I don't think it's clear which way it's going to go. In some countries, it is clear that it's going to go on the permission side, right? I guess I should probably state this in reverse. In many countries, they've already decided they're going the permission route. China seems to be building out an end-to-end permission blockchain architecture. And then the question is, if there will be countries that run an open architecture. I hope they do. I think it's going to be better for the world if they do. I don't think it will happen automatically. I don't think it will happen without people, having a discussion about what they think they deserve as a citizen in a digital world. And I'm hoping we can help stimulate some of that discussion. So I'm going to stop here. This is probably the most personal of the presentations. On the other ones, I tried to be somehow neutral. I am not neutral here. I think that's probably fair to say. I do not think it is 50-50 if we should have a completely permission digital architecture versus a permissionless one. And it's equally good for society if we have either one. I have a point of view or a bias, if you want to call it. But that's what I'm sharing in this presentation. So I am going to stop here. And George and VT, if we can maybe look at some questions, maybe for another 15 minutes or so. All right, trying to get into Discord where the questions are. Oh my gosh, Discord's yelling at me. Okay.
Okay, I think I'm in. Sorry, small glitch in the matrix. Okay, there are a few questions regarding the exam. I will take these, and then there are a couple of questions for 6.5 to 9. So, first question, will completing this course count toward course credit for unique MSc students? The quick answer is no. In the future, we plan to have a for-credit version of this course. As you might remember from our initial lectures, the University of Nicosia is in the process of accrediting a new master's degree, the Master's in Metaverse Systems. We hope to be able to launch this in the coming couple of months, and the first class will start in September 2023. So if this happens, this course will be made into a credit course. It will have a different form of assessment, obviously, for the students that are taking it for credit. So the short answer is that this particular course with this particular assessment that I mentioned, the multiple choice quiz for the end, will not count towards course credit for our students. Another question, is the certificate generative art? As I've said, we don't have all the details yet, so I cannot commit, but most likely, yes. Another question, is there a way to do the full course to obtain the certification? I'm not sure what exactly the student means here. I mean, this is the full course, so if you take the exam and score 60% or higher, as I've said, you will get the certificate of completion as an NFT on Ethereum, if you would like to do so. So, yeah, I don't know. If you meant something else, please let us know. 6.5 to 9, I don't know if you have access to the questions, or do you want me to read them for you, because I think they're...
No, I have them. I see 3 of them here. The first one, I'm laughing. I mean, will the first holodeck be for business or for pleasure? Yeah. Both, probably, I guess. I'm gonna go with both, though. I don't know, usually these things do start for pleasure, don't they, George? So, I mean, I'm going to say both, but if that's wrong, it's probably pleasure first and business afterwards.
I mean, pleasure is a business, isn't it? So yeah, it might be pleasure for the end user, but it might be a business application for the one who develops and markets it.
Yep. All right. Is the network state a new hybrid global structure, or does it become an alternative pseudo-digital government place? So this is very difficult and interesting question. We've spoken about it with Balaji, and we'll discuss this with him on his session because he's the expert on it. I think he has a more ambitious view of it than makes sense. I mean, it's his concept, right? Like he thinks of it even taking on indirectly physical space, right? Like so, his view thinks about, well, once you have this community and this community owns and controls physical space, it's like this distributed physical space. But my view of it is a little different, I think. I think it's going to be a very long time before nation states give up, a very long time, if ever, give up default control of kind of societal governance, right? And I'm fine with this. This doesn't bother me. And so what I think these are going to be are groups of people who operate in parallel to this. I mean, is the Catholic Church a network state? Arguably, yes, right? Like there's many people around the world who share a set of values, who contribute economically to those values, who have shared physical facilities around the world, churches, schools, in some countries, universities. The Vatican also has a very small nation state, but I don't think that's the important part. I mean, the Catholic Church, I think by Balaji's logic, is a network state. And in mature nation states, people are fine with this, right? In some nation states, they want to like control it, but like in mature nation states, like you can go to a Catholic church and share your beliefs with others, and that's fine. And so I think it's conceptually, for me, it's conceptually like that. It's something like and I'm not saying it's like a religion from that perspective, but it's something like a religion in how it's a different layer of people's lives organized in parallel to the nation state. So I think that's how it ends up. Okay, can you comment on feudalistic state Web3 appears to be from a societal evolution perspective? Or if you disagree with this view, do you think the development of space will follow a parallel path to societal evolution but a sped up rate? I don't think I understand the question, to be honest. I think Web 2 is more feudalistic right now than Web 3. I think Web 2 is almost completely feudalistic. You know, if you work, if you make a large part of your life on Facebook, well, you don't really have any rights at all there, right? They can just end your account at any time for any reason, and that's it. They don't owe you anything. And that seems to me to be a feudal type relationship Web3, I don't think is that way necessarily, and definitely not, not as bad. And I think we have an opportunity to have, self-sovereign actions in Web3 that perhaps, we don't in Web2. So I don't know. That's how I understand the question, at least. Do we have any other ones, or have I bored everyone to death already on this topic?
I don't see any other questions. No, I think this covers it all.
Okay.
So I guess we can renew our appointment for next Wednesday, unless we announce something earlier than that, which I don't think so at this stage. It's only Balaji that is missing, correct?
Yeah, or we'll see. Yeah, we'll announce. We don't have anything to announce now, but we will.
For Balaji, no, but the next panel discussion is next Wednesday with regarding the metaverse, and it's with Ryan from On Cyber, Charlie Cohen, and Maxim Perumal, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
That one's gonna be wild. We have Ryan and Maxwell and Charlie. It's gonna be wild. A lot of different and exciting viewpoints in that one. So I'm really looking forward to that one.
Okay, we all are, and you're gonna be moderating it, so I'm sure it's gonna be fine. Great. So see you next week then, everyone.
All right.
Bye bye for now.
Bye bye.
Bye.